This is James River Church, just south of Springfield, Missouri. This is the largest church in the state of Missouri and one of the largest mega churches in the United States. The big story in the news right now about this church is how it has split from the Assemblies of God, whose international headquarters are just up the road a bit in Springfield, Missouri.
James River Church Board of Trustees has moved to discontinue its formal denominational affiliation with the Assemblies of God. The church says that it's not changing its doctrine and will continue to partner with Assemblies of God in many ways, including the support of worldwide missions to spread the gospel.
The truth of the matter is much more difficult to understand because that was just a PR statement. John Lindell, the pastor of this church, has actually aligned himself with the heretical teachings of Bill Johnson from Bethel Church in Redding, California. To be fair, here's one of the best things that Bill Johnson said at James River Church. I did a very extensive sermon review of something that Bill Johnson said when he was at James River Church, and it's really bad. So I will put a link to that in the description of this video. I suggest you watch it if you've never really delved into the false teaching of Bill Johnson before.
Hey guys, if you've never watched a video of mine, this would be one to watch because I'm going to walk you through what looks like to be the greatest church heist of all time accomplished by John Lindell over the last 5 years.
This is Grant Olsen, who you are about to watch me interview. Grant and his family were members of James River Church for many years, and he's been sounding the alarm about the false teaching that has entered through the friendship with Bill Johnson. But most recently, he is sounding the alarm about how John Lindell has basically taken over this church. It's now a corporation run by him. There is no membership. Nobody has a say in what goes on. John and his family, his two sons, to be specific, will do whatever they want for as long as they want. So before we get started, I want to encourage you to go to Grant Olsen's Facebook page and check out all of the tremendous information that he has compiled to make his case that this is a literal stealing of a church by a so-called pastor. Okay, having said that, let's now begin the interview. And I will have links in the description to help you further understand what's going on here so that hopefully, Lord willing, this sort of thing can be prevented in the future. Hi, everybody. This is Steve Kozar. I am doing an interview here with Grant Olsen. Welcome, Grant.
Hello. Thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, we're going to talk about something we've interacted over the last year or so about the whole James River Church and John Lindell and the association with Bill Johnson and Bethel. And things have taken a turn for the worse in the last week. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, they have. I
think you've been documenting it. You've actually done a tremendous amount of research. What are you, like a private investigator or something?
No, I consider myself a concerned Christian. A lot of people are affected in my community, and I have a lot of friends and family that have gone to the church. Many and most have left, but there's still some there, of course, and I care for those people. They're in my backyard, so.
What do you know about the actual, I'm trying to adjust my screen here. What do you know about the size, the change of the congregation size?
I haven't been in attendance, so I can only kind of go off of what has been rumored. And obviously I get a lot of feedback from people through messages and private messages. And, they've definitely been impacted by the fact that people have left. Bill Johnson famously, maybe a year ago, said that I was an instigator of about 1,000 people leaving the church. I think at this point it's many thousands have left. But
what was this when it was at its largest? What was the size? I know it was very
I think
big.
it can run anywhere from 15 to 20,000 at their multiple campuses. Yeah.
Well, they still don't have as many campuses as Hit the Bar.
No, not as many campuses. Shout out to all those campuses.
Shout out. Paulette and I drove by James River Church. We were down in that area about 6 years ago, I think.
Okay.
I had her take a video as we were driving by, and it really is. It's hard to fathom how big that church is. We grew up actually in Lake Zurich, Illinois, really close to Willow Creek Church, which was in the neighboring town. And we saw that develop from absolutely nothing to a mega church, in the early part of our, we moved up to Wisconsin, but we would occasionally go back and visit. And I don't think Willow Creek was even as sprawling of a campus as James River Church is.
Right.
So if it had maybe 15 or 20,000 at its peak with all of its campuses and everything, we can guess that today maybe it's something like maybe half that, or maybe 60 or 70% of what it used to be, something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that about
they've
right?
probably seen 20 to 30% drop off. That'd be my best estimate without
Yeah.
knowing any certainty there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The stuff that goes through my head in a topic like this, there's like categories.
Right.
There's a category of false teaching,
Yes.
and that's actually a difficult category because there are theological differences that Christians have, like between myself as a Lutheran and an Assemblies of God person. There's a lot of really
Right.
substantial differences, but we don't say these people are, in a cult. We don't say
Right.
these people are dangerous. We just say, boy, there's some differences about how we view the Bible and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that issue, even between the Assemblies of God and other Protestant denominations. But then on top of that, you've got the really specific situation of John Lindell starting out teaching, from what I understand, pretty typical Assemblies of God, Pentecostal, charismatic teaching,
Yeah.
and then shifting over time, which you have also documented.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not teaching what he used to teach,
No.
even though he would never come right out and say, hey, everybody,
Yeah.
I'm changing my theology.
Well, actually, he has said that he reserves the right to improve and learn. So, and I get that, but he uses it as a springboard to then completely 180 on very, very basic doctrine. So.
Yeah, and they would say it's growing. They
Yeah.
would never say I'm veering off towards a more heretical viewpoint. They would say they would say I'm growing, and then there's this category beyond those categories, which gets really dark, which is actual lying, actual fraud,
Right.
actual theft.
Correct.
And so we've got all of those topics,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't want people to think, I guess, that if we do talk about fraud and theft, it's like, I think people could see that as it's ignoring theological issues because
Right.
you're going right for this very sensational sort of a topic. And my preference would be that we didn't have to talk about theft.
Right.
Because it's
Yeah.
horrible.
It sounds so hyperbolic, right?
Yes, exactly. It sounds
the
like you're
reality
exaggerating.
I think once we present the evidence, I think most people can come to a conclusion that, man, it sure looks like theft. Man, it sure seems like maybe some law enforcement should be involved here. Like, this doesn't seem right, right? Yeah.
And the season we're in within the church in general, but even more so the charismatic movement,
Mm-hmm.
especially people associated with Bill Johnson, like Todd White,
Mm-hmm.
like Sean Bolt,
Right.
like Mike Bickle, the
Right.
list goes on. I think this is actually a good time to kind of take this really difficult issue and bring it to the forefront, because unless people do what you're doing, take the steps that you're taking, this is just going to keep happening.
Yeah.
And churches that would otherwise be, safe from this sort of thing, they're just going to keep falling into this.
Right.
So I think what I'd like to do is to kind of skip past the Bethel affiliation,
Right.
not because it isn't important, but because there's just so many topics. But John Lindell has very clearly veered towards the New Apostolic Reformation, Bethel, signs and wonders. You should always be healed all the time, no matter what. And if you don't get healed, it's basically your fault, even though we'll never say it that plainly. That's where he veered.
Yeah.
And then the issue that's just come up is, oh, by the way, we just left the Assemblies of God.
Right.
No big deal. Everything's fine. Just trust me. One of the things that I noticed many years ago was that whoever's got the mic controls the narrative. And in a situation with a megachurch, it's pretty much impossible for the general congregation to really know what's going on unless they are somehow getting a peek behind the scenes.
Correct.
You have to really dig, because they can just spin the story however they want. So you're the guy that said, wait a minute, something's not right here. Maybe give us, I don't want to go all the way to the beginning of this because probably be too long. But what led you to the steps that you've taken in just this past week to uncover what happened with the bylaws and the way they just bypassed the entire constitution of the church?
Correct. Well, so basically in the last week and a half since the announcement, I think it's been about a week now, a little over a week, that they announced they're leaving the Assembly of God. I went back to the bylaws, which I was somewhat familiar with, because I knew that they had a meeting back in 2019, and we'll get to that maybe in more detail. But that meeting changed the way that the church leadership is decided, and basically removed this ability for the church members to have a say or a vote. And how that was done is pretty, I mean, I'll detail that here, like I said, in a few, but all of that then led to this new structuring of these bylaws that allowed for this leaving of the Assemblies of God with technically not violating the original bylaws. And I don't know how that's the legality of that. I don't know how that really structure wise. I think some people are concerned about how that was pulled off. It was, I mean, it looks to be unethical at best. And so right. I think walking you through those steps is going to be pretty clear to the people watching that, man, he's got at very best, John's got a lot of questions he needs to answer, a lot. And I don't know how you answer them without giving some sort of intentionality that everybody's going, really? Wow. So,
yeah. And I know, based on everything that's happened to this point, the guy with the mic doesn't have to answer the question. He doesn't have to. The only reason that he would be forced to answer questions is if the congregation as a whole said to him, look, buddy, we're done with this. If you don't tell us the honest answers, if you don't answer this list of questions we have for you, we're out. That's what it would take. Yep. But he knows that every week you get on stage.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you need to do because it's so important, the work that God is doing here. You know, the people are coming against us, but that's what they did to Jesus. You use emotion, you use drama, you paint a picture, and that's probably what he'll continue doing unless the people there stand up and say, we're not buying this, pal.
Yeah.
You've been doing this for too long. You stole this church from us, and we don't want you to do this anymore. We want it back. That's what has to happen. Honestly, it probably won't, but man, wouldn't it be amazing if that did happen?
Be amazing if the church members could do that. It would also be amazing if the Assemblies of God would have some backbone in this matter. You know, they're the ones that required the initial bylaws. So I'll share them with you so you can maybe put them into this conversation. But the original bylaws have two clauses in them. One of them is Article 4, and one of them is Article 9. I consider Article 4 to be kind of like the door shut on leaving the Assembly of God. And so that was copied and pasted, I believe, from the Assembly of God bylaws into the James River Church bylaws when they were at inception, probably, I think it was like 1998 or so, something like that. So these bylaws say that if you want to disaffiliate with the Assembly of God, so Article 4 says, if you want to disaffiliate with the Assembly of God, you need to notify the Assemblies of God and then bring in those people that are in leadership at the Assemblies of God to present to the church reasons to not disaffiliate. And then the church has a vote, right? Do we disaffiliate or not? Those who don't want to disaffiliate get to keep the assets of the church. So the way it reads is literally one person could be like, hey, I'm not leaving the Assemblies of God, right? That person would get the whole church and then get to continue operating, appoint a pastor, right? And continue operating that church as an Assembly of God church. The other option would be they all are unanimous, right? They're all in lockstep and they say, 100% of us are wanting to leave the Assemblies of God. If that's the case, then according to Article 4, they have to liquidate. So they have to give it all to the Assembly of God, and the Assembly of God would liquidate the assets. So that Article 4 is like, you're not leaving the Assemblies of God. And it makes sense, right, Stephen? If we think about this, like, if you're going to build your church based off of our denomination or our structure, because people come to you knowing you have this accountability structure and at least this agreement on doctrine, then you can't just take that church after 10, 15 years and go make it whatever you want, right? So Article 4 is a very reasonable article. And like I said, every Assemblies of God church, I presume, has that article in it at inception. Then you have Article 9. Article 9 is the lock and key. Like it's a deadlock on that door. And what does it say? It says, if you want to change Article 4, you need 100% of the congregation, all voting members, sorry, not congregation, voting members, they have to be members, but all voting members have to be in unison to make any change to Article 4. So that's your door, there's your lock. You're not leaving the Assemblies of God with these in place. And that's all based off of church membership. So, I'm presuming, so I like I said, I don't know the intention of John Lindell fully because he hasn't told me all of his intention, but it looks pretty nefarious. And here's why. So in June 2019, June 19th, 2019, he has a meeting, and it's a special business meeting. And before that, you're supposed to notify the church 2 weeks in advance on 2 Sundays in advance, or 5 days in advance by mail. That's all in the bylaws. Everybody I've talked to that's been church members, they don't recollect ever getting notification multiple days in advance, maybe a few days, but not 2 weeks and not 5 days by mail. Okay. So, and it's supposed to tell you what this vote is about. So they show up for this Wednesday night vote. Those are who stay after church. It's at 7:44. All the notes are there and you can share that with the audience, but the vote happens, and they're voting on 3 different resolutions. The first one is to change out of it's a special 352 non-for-profit to a 355, fairly inconsequential, but supposedly some sort of restructuring of the non-for-profit. Resolution 2 is to change the Constitution to be amended, instead of 2/3 of the church members, to the board of trustees, right? The board of trustees that is chosen by the church members. Okay. So then resolution 3 is to restructure how the bylaws are voted on. And it was a majority of the church membership now being transferred to this board of trustees. So now you're having this authority for the Constitution and the bylaws being transferred to the board of trustees rather than the church members voting. Why would you do that? Well, what happened is that night, John and a number of other, I believe, people that he communicated in advance to communicate this to the church. After I've talked to a number of people now, what went down is it was sold to the church members that the church was growing, right? Needed to be more agile. Administratively, it needed to be able to act quicker to acquire property and adjust the bylaws and the Constitution. So we need our board of directors, our board of trustees that are chosen by the church members to have a little bit more authority to act more efficiently. That's what it was sold as. It was a tough sell. And eventually the church members were convinced, not unanimous, but they voted in favor of that decision. Here's the kicker, Stephen. This is the kicker. None of these people thought what they were doing is giving up their ability to vote at all. And that's the ruse. So within 1 year, this new board of trustees with this new authority, I shouldn't say new board, right? Originally, they were chosen by the church, and now they have this authority to rewrite bylaws and Constitution. What do they do with this Constitution bylaws? All of those protections that were in it, scrapped every one of them. So they got rid of church membership completely. And they filed that in October 22 of 2020. So October 22nd of 2020, it removed church membership, and John Lindell was named the chairman of the board for choosing the board. So that is the deal. None of these church members knew that their vote to give a little additional authority to help the church, that's what they were told they were doing. They were essentially relinquishing all of their voting rights, and now there's no longer any members. So that's that bait and switch, Stephen, is what's got me so fired up, because it's such a backhanded way to take full control of a church and put it in the hands of one man and remove it from all of these voting members that existed, and they didn't even know that's what they were voting for.
Right. Let me understand, or let me try to understand. The board of trustees, you said originally was chosen by the members.
My dad actually was on the board of trustees back in the day, so I'm pretty familiar with. They had to be nominated and then voted, and then so there was accountability there, and the church knew who they were. Now the church does not know who these 3 members are. I had to go find it on the Missouri Secretary of State website.
Huh. Okay, so this is the question. In an ideal situation, it sounds like kind of a representative
Correct.
government, like the U.S. We give our representatives the ability to
Right.
represent us. That's what they
Right.
sold it as. How did it change from them being chosen by the membership to becoming trustees that are autonomous
Right.
from
Worse
the
than
membership?
that, these trustees aren't just autonomous from the membership, they're chosen by a dictator, right?
So are they even part of the church? Are they
They
from the
are.
congregation or
They are
from the membership?
congregation. John chooses them. The chairman of the board chooses them.
Did he choose them after the
So
vote? So they're all
he
new
chose them
since
after
then?
they restructured their bylaws. And it gets worse, okay? It gets worse. So I don't know if you saw the other video I posted about this vote coming up to leave the Assemblies of God. So John goes to the multiple church board members. There's 3 of them. And one of them is a holdout. Well, John doesn't want to hold out. He wants to be able to tell the whole church that this is a unanimous decision and we're all in unity on this one.
Yeah. So what did he do? How did he get rid of him?
I don't know the specific details because I didn't want to pry, and I don't want to give up any source. But the reality is I know that the man resigned because he disagreed with the decision. So I know that much. He disagreed with the decision so much he resigned. Now, whether or not John said, "You're gone," or he goes, I can't go down this path with you. I don't know which one is which. And I don't think it's really super consequential because he would have been pushed out likely anyways if he wanted to stay around.
Right. If you were in that position, maybe with good intentions, and then you get this deep into it and you find out, oh no, this guy is trying to be king of the church. And I have to either go along with him or I'll be continually fighting with him.
So
and
you ready for the middle ground of all this? So in between this 2019 and just last week, John appointed his 2 sons as successors to pastoring the church.
Oh.
So that's also not how that's not how the bylaws read in advance. You would have church members and they would vote on that. Right. So that was scrapped. And now John Lindell picked his son, David Lindell and Brandon Lindell, to take over the church. Now, would the church have chosen them? Maybe, but there was no option given and no vote made. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I know that years ago, we went to a charismatic church here in Madison, and it was not part of the Assemblies of God. It was part of the Fellowship of Christian Assemblies, which is similar, but a little bit less restricted by the denomination because it's not a denomination, it's a fellowship. But the idea was always presented to us that, we don't want you guys to get so involved in all these intricate businessy sorts of things. You don't need to come to all these meetings. Just trust us. We can be more efficient. We can get things done. If you just let us do stuff, behind the scenes, we're going to do what's right. You can just trust us. And I don't know in this situation with my church, if they really meant that. There's no way to know unless you're, like close personal friends with the pastor. You just have to trust him. But in this situation, it looks like they use that same sort of reasoning, and then they just yanked the church away from the membership so from what I understand you're saying right now, there is no membership.
There's no membership.
In the church.
No membership. The church has no members. That's all the article. You'll put it in here, but you can put it in before where I said that.
Yeah.
It says chairman of the board is John Lindell, and the church will have no members. And they could have easily. So here's a little issue with intentionality, right? What was the intention? Well, I think the intention was to leave the Assemblies of God. And why is that? You could have easily copied Article 4 from the original bylaws and Article 9 from the original bylaws. So if you submit new bylaws and you just omit these 2 articles that protect the church as an Assemblies of God church, if you omitted them, it means you may down the road want to get out of the Assemblies of God because you remove those protections. And another factor too that I want you to know is before 2019, financials were presented to the church. So that's another issue now, right? They're not presenting
presenting any financials? Oh yeah,
No,
that's not a
never
good
a
sign.
good sign, right? And so you're seeing this, and it's kind of like the frog in boiling water. It's a step at a time. It's a little hotter, and then
Yeah.
now the fire is on. And you look back, and I think that's why I had these aha moments over this past few days. Is I'm going, man, now that I see the final play, he's fully in charge of all the
Hmm.
assets. He now has left any accountability from the Assemblies of God. Um, he makes all the decisions going forward. He's handing it over to his family, his kids. They can write checks to themselves however they want and anywhere they want.
Hmm.
No real structure. If somebody on this board has an issue with it, bye-bye, right? I mean, so it's just, and I don't even publish who these board members are. I maybe said that earlier, but so if you want to know who these board members are, you got to be a little detective and go to Missouri Secretary of State and scroll down, click on the links, try to find who's filing
Huh.
for that. And so, you could do that, I guess, as the church, but no one really, if you asked anybody at James River Church, they would not be able to tell you the board members at all.
And if you I don't want to sound too harsh against individual Christians because everybody's at a different place. Maybe they didn't learn a lot of things and they've been manipulated to such an extent that they just can't think clearly anymore. But why would you go to a
It's not a
church like
church,
this
right,
at all?
Stephen?
Why? Yeah, right.
It's literally not a
It
church.
literally, I don't know how you, I mean, we've been saying this for a long time about mega churches. It's a big show, it's entertainment, it's an organization, it's a money making endeavor. This is
The
literally
Bible
that thing.
doesn't
It's
give
not a
us
church
like
anymore.
cut organizational structure, but it does clearly, repeatedly say we need a plurality of elders, right? This is not a difficult
Well, and
concept
also,
when you remove any sort of
right.
accountability. I own my own business. I have accountability I've set up for myself because I know I need accountability from my wife, from other leaders in our business. You would be silly to not have good accountability to keep things from becoming corrupt. Good men make bad decisions when there's no accountability. And God, it's like we try to
Yeah.
outsmart God. Think about this. It's like this whole move to then take church membership, the board being responsible to the church members by being voted on by the church members, which is a great structure because now you've got this plurality of elders that are responsible to listen and adhere to what the church wants. And you just have this good flow. Now you just have one man at the top making all the decisions, and you have a dictatorship.
Making all the money. I mean, that's another thing that we can clearly see from the Bible, that you don't become a pastor in order to make yourself rich.
No.
It's so obvious.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of that. You're a servant of the
Servant.
people. And I keep going back to the idea that in order for this to work, you have to be manipulative. You have to use the power of manipulation on an ongoing basis, and you have to build on manipulative tactics over and over and over again. And you cannot face criticism with any level of honesty or transparency. You can't. It doesn't work. You have to continually paint your opponents as Pharisees, as negative. You don't have the Holy Spirit.
I've been told I'm
You're working
obsessed
against
because I won't just walk away from it, right? And I've been pretty vocal about it. It's it's crazy because, if what did my wife say? Evil survives in silence. So when good men don't speak up, that's how we get our churches in the messes they're in. And I really wish, like as I mentioned before, I jumped on here with you, like, what's the purpose of me being vocal now? Well, I probably can't change what happens at James River Church. That may have already been a foregone conclusion. But man, anybody listening, going to any church out in anywhere in the world, don't let any pastor or leader in your church convince you to give up your ability to influence your church's leadership. You should have access to the elders. You should be able to at least know who they are, preferably vote for them if you can. So that way they're selected. But that way you really have I think I've had some people mention to me that like, MacArthur, I think his church, Grace Church, right, has like,
Grace to You is the ministry. The church is
but it's got like 30 or 40 elders. I mean, and they won't make any decision unless it's 100% unison. I mean, that's how much accountability they want to moving in the right direction together. It's, I'm not saying you got to be that maybe stringent, but man, it helps protect the bride of Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. The use of what I like to call thought-stopping devices, it's everywhere. It's all they got.
Yeah.
You twist the Bible, you make people feel guilty. You use that Darvo technique. You're familiar with that?
No.
That deflect.
I get the ad hominem attack all the time, which is, you're just you're just a jerk, just an angry, you're personal attacking somebody, and none of what you say has to be personally attacked. It can just be substantiated with evidence, and you're really just saying, hey, from what it looks like, this guy is not just lied multiple times, but now he's pretty much a liar. I mean, when you lie repeatedly and you're unrepentant in it, that's a liar. When somebody is teaching a false gospel repeatedly, will not correct it. Like, I think there was an article I read that was very good about how do you define false teachers. And it was basically like, we can all be in error, of course, but error that affects the gospel, okay, that's serious. But are you still correctable? If you're correctable and people go, hey, that was wrong, and you're like, yeah, that was wrong, I see that. But John has been uncorrectable, he's been unrepentant. And so we have a liar, we have a false teacher, and with this latest issue, we have some really big questions that look like a lot of deception was happening, and a lot of people were I come to the word disenfranchised. I know that might seem a little bit like I don't know, just regular world conversation, but I would think of this as an American voter. You said earlier, if I voted for senators and then they go in and the first thing they do is remove my voting rights, I am disenfranchised. I am upset and probably going to a different country. And
I think psychologically, it's really hard for people to admit that they're part of something that's turned horribly wrong. Yeah. And the leader that they put all their trust into is actually not being truthful with them. It's so hard, in fact, that they will ignore all the evidence because they don't want to feel that uncomfortable feeling of, gosh, I'm kind of in a cult now.
Yeah.
I've been mistreated to such an extent, and I've been here for 20 years, and I've told everybody how great this place is, and now I would have to go back on all of that and admit I was wrong and admit that I was part of something and I got tricked. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to stay here and I'm going to keep defending this thing, even though I have to push back a lot of things.
Two sides of this coin, right? They're both painful. One is the one is in the cult. They have to constantly defend against, they have to like shut off their eyes. It's a really weird way to live life. So they have to, like, anybody who has any sensible care for them to try to show them the evidence, they're like, I'm just not looking at it. And then the other side of it is you have to go and heal from this, right? It's tough. You got to leave your church you've been going to maybe for a long time. You got to make new friends. You got to find a new place of worship. You got to reconstruct some of the things you've been taught incorrectly. You feel duped, right? It's not a good feeling. So I sympathize with both sides. I'm just pleading with those that are still, with the scales down, that I don't think I can somehow make them change their mind. I do think I can keep, just like you have been for me. You and Paula have been such a good source for my wife and I to, when the Holy Spirit opens our eyes and you see just a crack in the wall. Mm-hmm. And I've witnessed this firsthand, close up with people. They see one little crack in the wall. And they're good people. They're Christians, right? They're Christ followers. They've been kind of deceived for a while, but they see that little crack, and all of a sudden they'll peer through it, and they're like, "Oh my!" And they just their expansion, they find channels like yours. They maybe land on more like mine, and they learn about Bethel and Bill Johnson, and they just go down the rabbit hole, right? Over the course of a few months, and they finally get the courage and confidence and affirmation to go, I need to leave this, and so. God bless you for your efforts. And I know you maybe you get you hear probably all the frustrating stuff and people push back. I want you to know from us that, we're grateful for what you do. And, honestly, my wife and I feel a little bit of a calling to, we're not going to quit our, I think you and Paulette do both, you're both our full-time jobs.
She's the one that actually has the full-time job. If it wasn't for her, I would be in trouble, because I do make almost a full-time income now between our Patreons for our patrons on our
Okay.
Patreon page. We have people who
Yeah.
are supporting us, which is amazing.
Good.
And then I do get ad revenue. It's not
Yeah.
like a good living, like, I can rest comfortably. She still has to work. She, covers the insurance, but
Yeah.
thankfully by the grace of God, I'm actually able to do it pretty much full time. I'm working on a commission painting now. And so that's
Yeah.
super helpful whenever I make extra money from my art, which used to be my real job. I'll never give it up completely, and I'll still do projects, but I'm actually in this interesting place right now where I get to make content that helps people. And your story and so many people like you is my goal with the channel is not to convince everybody who loves Bill Johnson that they should no longer love Bill Johnson, because that's frankly impossible. It's for all the people who are like, I've been hearing about Bill Johnson, and my pastor brought him up, and he said that he recommended him, and then I listened to him, and something seems wrong with this guy, and I can't exactly figure it out, because I like my pastor, I like my church, and I normally trust him,
Right.
but there's something off here. I want them to find my channel, and I'm the guy that says, no, you're not crazy. Your pastor's wrong. Bill Johnson's wrong. And all those feelings that you had in the back of your mind, that's how the Holy Spirit's working in your life now. He's saying, and then when you talked about that crack in the door that people have, my hope is that they don't close the door and pretend that they didn't see what they saw. Because I think that's what John Lindell is really, really good at doing. He's good at coming up with little catchphrases and sayings and stories to make those people slam the door shut so that they go, oh, phew, okay, I'm good. John's a good guy. Everything's okay. He didn't really steal the church.
He went so far to call discernment unbelief. You know what discernment is? It's really just unbelief. You think you're just a little more wise.
I use that clip.
All figured out.
Yep.
But you're
I used
unbelief.
that clip in a video. I think it was about a year ago, because that's what you have to do when you're manipulating large numbers of people. Darvo. It is an abusive tactic where the abuser uses deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender to deflect accountability and silence the victim. So DARVO, deny, attack, and then reverse victim and offender.
Reverse victim.
So all of a sudden, Grant Olsen now is the bad guy. And how dare you come against what God is doing? Don't you understand what God is doing here? You mean like the fake growing of toes that aren't actually growing? That's what we're supposed to be protecting? The fake miracles?
Stephen, did you see the one I pointed out? I hate to say it, it's not my favorite because I don't like any fake miracles, but the one that I'm just like, so what in the world was Brandon and David 2 weeks in a row get up on stage and claim that a woman that was been wheelchair bound for 27 years from MS is now out of her wheelchair and walking.
No, I didn't hear that. Yeah.
They claim it 2 weeks in a row. And then you could tell the church didn't even respond really to when Brandon said it. And I'm just thinking to myself, people like you and me that are not, hoodwinked by their deception, you go, well, if that's true, why isn't everybody like standing up and clapping? And why isn't this person on the stage? Like this is, you just said somebody hadn't walked for 27 years, needed a wheelchair every morning, every night. They couldn't get out of their own bed on their own feet. They had to use wheels. Like, come on. It just is so laughable to say that and people not go, well, why aren't they on the stage? Why can't we see this? Like,
well, you know what?
It makes no sense.
The video that I made last year that has some of John Lindell and the crazy story about the woman who claimed her toes grew. They said it happened. Yes. We've got the footage. It's real. I saw it. I talked to people who saw it or whatever. Yeah. And then everybody's going, yeah, but we don't have any evidence. You haven't shown us anything. And he says, well, if you have to see the evidence, you wouldn't believe anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you see the video I did with the Facebook post and all that?
I probably used it in my video, if I remember right.
Yeah. Basically, there was a Facebook thread that had her and another guy who didn't believe it. And he went back and found her old photo of her foot, compared it to the new photo. Yeah. So, and what's really sad about that one, Stephen, is I've had a few people that are high school friends with her reach out to me. She lives about 70 miles west of here. And they reached out to me and said that she's had so many like difficult things in her life, pretty rough life. And this was a great example of how she was spiritually abused. She was manipulated into this. They should have checked her out and been like, okay, this isn't verifiable, hun. But instead they elevated this person, made it a story to really pat themselves on the back that they had this, because Bill Johnson's the one who made the claim, we're going to have what do you call it, generative or regenerative, creative miracles. So he set the tone or standard that we're going to actually have legs or limbs grow back.
Here's a recent video of John Lindell preaching, and you'll notice that he's actually missing part of his pinky. And nobody bothered to heal that. I find that very interesting for a guy that talks about how healing is the norm. John Lindell and his buddies, Randy Clark and Bill Johnson, claim to have healings all the time. Listen to what Bill Johnson says about people who claim that healing is for today, but they don't actually demonstrate that healings are for today.
I'd like to suggest to you that if everyone believed miracles were for today, actually could demonstrate them, there would no longer be a group of people that didn't believe they were for today. It's the living witness of having a theology that we can't demonstrate that speaks against us.
And so the toes were the fulfillment of this prophecy, if you will. And it was a total joke, total lie. The church knows it. I don't know of anybody in the leadership that believes it. But I think about 3 or 4 months ago, John stood up there and said it again. I mean, it's one of those things. It's just, he's got to keep running with it. Wow. And it's crazy.
The thing that, if you believe in a leader and you know for sure, because you've seen it with your own eyes, you know for sure that he has lied intentionally at least one time.
Yeah.
If you think that's okay because of whatever reason, like, oh, this movement is so important, this church is so important, this ministry is so important that it's okay that he lied that one time, you're done. This is your faith is now a total joke. Your church is a joke. Your whole movement is not a real Christian movement anymore. It's at best a very very confused version of Christianity. But I would say it's more like a cult than anything else. It's more like groupthink.
Well, it has a slippery slope, because at that point, I mean, that's one overt, obvious lie. We're not talking about something that's really debatable. But then you've got him doing like another one that's super, it's easy to prove. And he claims Mark Driscoll never apologized for what he did on stage. Regardless of what you think about Mark Driscoll, this is not the debate. I've had people like, well, I don't like Mark. I'm not trying to even make that game. I don't want to get into that debate. My point is, Mark Driscoll clearly apologized and even said what he apologized for. He even said what he should have done differently. And John, a few days later, gets on a stage and says you should stop following his ministry because he didn't apologize. He lied. So yeah, John's got a lot to answer for there and fix, but he's been no signs of returning or repenting on that.
The thing that's really hard is, if you're that unrepentant, if you're that willing to deceive, if you're that comfortable with deception, you're just going to keep doing it.
Oh yeah.
So to ask them, and you have asked him to meet, you've asked him
repeatedly.
I've privately
messaged him. I've privately messaged Brandon and David, Kurt Parsley, who's on staff there, multiple board members, other pastors that are, associate pastors. I've gone online and made addresses to him. Like I said, I think you have the church leadership that's kind of afraid to keep him accountable. And then I'm not here defending the Assemblies of God by any means. I think in some ways the chickens have come home to roost, that phrase. They didn't hold this man accountable when he made these decisions a long time ago. He's been teaching stuff and inviting Bill Johnson in, who's clearly got false doctrine that is against what the Assembly of God has been in the past. And you sent me that video on the latter rain movement. I got John Lindell a year and a half ago praising the latter rain movement. It's crazy. And the Assembly of God is totally the position paper and the stance and the vote that they did in 1949 to really go, we're not going to go down this latter rain mess. So
this is one of the things I've noticed, that people like Daniel Kalenda, who say there's no such thing as the New Apostolic Reformation, they continually make the claim that their beliefs are the same as all Pentecostals historically have had. And at the same time, they're promoting basically let-her reign doctrine, which goes against not the
Orthodox
Presbyterians,
Christianity.
not the Methodists, not and it goes against the largest Pentecostal denomination in the world. It goes against the Assemblies of God. So you can't claim that you're just a regular, charismatic or just a good old-fashioned Pentecostal
I'll take
when
this
you're not.
chance since I'm on this platform. It might he get into some of these leaders' ears, maybe, but the Assembly of God leadership, you guys need to stand up. And
yeah, they're not going to.
I know.
I'm afraid.
But they need to know
right.
that people are waking up to this. You're becoming phony, and you say you're for something, but when people go against it, you do nothing about it, because what are we supposed to believe other than money? I mean, so why if money always trumps biblical sound doctrine and conviction, what does it say about your spirit? I mean, who are you sold out to?
Right. And this has been the claim against denominational structure in general, that it's just a big business or whatever, and it's not.
Mm.
The intention is good. It's to say, let's band together.
'Cause we agree, yeah.
And we agree to these very specific theological ideas. We want to protect these ideas. We don't want false teaching to creep in. That's a good reason to band together under the umbrella of a denomination.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're going to do that, then you have to stick to the things that you claim are really important. When those things get shredded, you don't say, well, we got to give everybody space to do their own thing. Well, no, that's not the purpose of the denomination to begin with.
Yeah.
It's to stop those things from happening.
And you already know this. This isn't any surprise to you, but unfortunately, the hyper-charismatic movements are, I would say charismatics in general, but the hyper-charismatics especially, they are ripe for the picking for these type of false teachings, because it seems to run rampant. And because they're seeking new revelation and new ideas, there's just no safeguards there. They're not going, no, we can believe that the Holy Spirit moved the way it did in the Bible, but we can't just go beyond that and create all these new doctrines that do not clearly represent themselves in the New Testament church.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest draws to somebody like Bill Johnson, is the idea that he's got this new thing, because everybody's disappointed with the old thing.
Gosh.
And I think if you just teach a certain way, you're always reacting against the thing that you're not. Mm-hmm. And you create a straw man of the thing that you're not and make it really bad, so that your new thing appears to be much, much better. Mm-hmm. So you say, we're the place where all the miracles are happening. Yeah. We're the place where the Spirit's moving. Well, okay, those are all good ideas. The Spirit moving is a great idea, but you're just saying that.
Yeah.
You're just saying that it's only happening in your place, right, and you're assuming that all the other places don't have the Spirit anymore.
I've watched John a lot lately, obviously, with analyzing some of the things he's taught falsely, and the special move of God phrase, right? Mm-hmm. That thing is being used a dozen times a night, a day. Huh. I mean, every service, there's a special move of God, and it really is. It's almost like they think they have a corner on the Holy Spirit and the move of God in their church. And
I really am honored to be here. I'm so indebted to Pastor John and Debbie and just the whole family, the whole tribe here. You guys have done so amazing to host a move of God.
We're in a move of God. So to this point, almost 4,000 people have put in testimonies of healing, extraordinary healings, as we walk through this move of God. I mean, if there's anything a group of people who are steeped in false piety and religiosity can't stand, it's a move of God. Here's what's interesting, and the reason why I would talk about this is because as we're in a move of God, part of me would want to wait and explain something after the fact. The other part of me says, you know what? I think we do well to be aware of some things, especially because most people in this room have not been a part of a ginormous move of God. And what do you think has sustained the move of God now over 30 years at James River? I would say this, in one word, unity.
And it really creates this really warped view of Christianity, and it props up people in a way that's totally unhealthy. and makes them susceptible, I think, more so to false teaching, because they
Right.
want to
Well,
be part of something special. They want to be
yes.
unique and new and better. And who doesn't love that idea? But, you know, the church is about Christ.
Exactly.
It isn't about you.
Yeah. If you just kind of set aside the gospel repeatedly, or you claim that you're actually in favor of the gospel while you barely even mention it, Todd White, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill Johnson.
They will never say, "Oh, I don't really care about the gospel. I don't really care about Christ. I want to promote my own movement." They never come out and say that.
How about the week of power, with the week of presence and power? The most powerful thing ever is resurrection power.
Yes.
Saved every man who gives his heart to Christ.
This is
that's the power we celebrate every day as a Christ follower.
Right.
But the week of power, zero mention of it. I mean,
right.
They're gonna talk about heal the sick, raise the dead. Golf guy injury that, he's like, yeah, I'm somewhat better, and it's bad, and they never bring. And I'm even going, okay, well, if somebody's healed, maybe they can give their story of redemption and how they turned from their sin and turned toward God and gave their heart to Him and really decided to, surrender their life to Him, but that's not the story they celebrate.
Right.
And the gospel message isn't tied to the miracles. And that just doesn't make any sense. Biblically, we always saw that as a kind of a pattern of, the miracles affirmed the messenger.
Right.
And they were really about how do we support the gospel message, especially in its infancy, when the people didn't understand it, didn't know it, right? So
I wanted to recommend a book. I want to make sure I get the name right, but I think people in the audience who are struggling with this, who are in the midst of, kind of having the rug pulled out from under them. I just got the paperback.
While you're pulling that up, I'd say to anybody that's watching that, you definitely watch lots of videos from Steve Kosar. He's got a wonderful channel. Obviously, they have some fun with Hit the Bar, which is a good way to think of some of the false teaching that happens that just slips right in a message. But he's got some great content that goes through. I know you've covered all of those false teachers. Some of the common phrases that people use, the same Bible verses, they all borrow the same teaching from and kind of replicate it. Those are all very helpful. I kind of use the analogy, Stephen. It's kind of like if we're all inside of a castle, and we got good fence, good walls built. Where are we vulnerable? It's going to be the gates, right? And so you do a wonderful job, and I want to try to help do the same. But let's make sure the church knows where we're vulnerable. And there's certain passages in Scripture that these abusers of Scripture use to prop up their false teaching, and we need to go, hey, that's where they can get in. We need to know why we keep that door shut. We don't let that door open. It lets in the wolves, right? So anyways.
Yeah, I like that. Matthew 18, there's the one that gets used. Yeah. Did you talk to him in person first? How dare you go online?
Yep.
Yeah, so the guy can put up videos with millions of views all around the world, and you can't have a meeting with him.
Yeah.
You literally can't.
Yeah.
I've proven this. If you want to meet with Bill Johnson or Chris Valentin, and you go on their website, it says, sorry, you can't do that.
Right. Don't touch the anointed.
If you come to church, you might bump into him in the hall as he's leaving to get into his $180,000 car, and you might be able to, say hi to him at best. Anyway, the book is called Something's Not Right. Okay. Decoding the Hidden Tactics of Abuse and Freeing Yourself from Its Power by Wade Mullen.
Yeah.
That's the book that I had the audio version. It was so good. I listened to just the first or second chapter. I'm like, I got to just buy this because I want to be able to reference it. But I think people need to they need to peel back all the layers of like, how did I get here? How did this happen to this church? And how did I fall for it? And how can I make sure that these things don't happen again in the future? And I think the biggest thing, obviously, is just to read your Bible.
It is.
100%. The thing that I like to tell the story about is I was just a worship leader guy. I'm not even a worship leader. I was in the worship praise band. I would play, and I was there for more than one service. So I would hear the sermon more than once. And honestly, kind of out of somewhat just boredom, I would look at the verses as he was quoting stuff, and I would check, And I would just look at the verse and listen to the way he was using it, and I would check it in the Bible, and I'd say to myself, well, that's not what the verse is about. And then I would think, well, is that what the Bible is? It's just a thing we can use to make it say whatever we were going to say anyway.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was like, well, that can't be right. There's something wrong here. I mean, and I think sometimes there are preachers who do that because they literally don't know better. They're not being totally deceitful. They just think it's nice to pull a verse in that kind of helps them make their point. But if the verse isn't actually making your point, you shouldn't be doing that.
No.
But this is a place we are in the church where people love the new thing. Yeah. They love the new fresh guy, the new movement. I kid you not, we recorded this this interview on May 2nd, and on May 4th, just 2 days later, John Lindell posted this.
But tonight what I want to do is I want to talk to you about the new thing that God wants to do.
And the flashy, the issue of populism is one that I'm really interested in, especially in the political realm that we're in right now. If you're a populist, what that means is you appeal to the lowest common denominator of public thought, and you appeal to their emotional state, not to their logic or to their reason, or even to things like history or the political process. In the church, that's exactly what is happening. The guys like John Lindell and Bill Johnson, there are a number of things. They're false teachers. They're deceptive. They misuse the Bible for sure. I've proven that.
In the 1950s, right, Stephen? They had to use tense to distort and ruin the gospel. Now they can use these, right? And so these men that really are about creating a name for themselves, they have a whole new avenue, and it's so easy for them to create reels and Instagram, sensationalize Christianity, make it what it shouldn't be about, and build a following to then spread deceptive, downright false gospel messages. And we're seeing that at an accelerated rate. Yeah.
You're exactly right. And one of the reasons I'm a little bit hesitant to go down that road is because it tends to sound like all hope is lost. Things are really bad. They're only getting worse. And Christians often are, honestly, they're a little bit too negative about everything all the time. And people might be surprised to hear me say that because, my channel is all about exposing false teaching, but that's not all that I do with my life. That would be a terrible way to live. It's just kind of where God has put me. But I think there's two things going on at the same time, and I don't know where this is going. But you're exactly right. People like Bill Johnson can say whatever they want to say. They create their own narrative. They spin everything in the way that they want to, and there's no one in their own realm that can stop that from happening. Everybody that surrounds them is on their side. Everything they put out, every book they publish, every speech they give, it's a totally Bill Johnson affirming environment. And because of the internet, they can put that out to a larger audience than ever before, not just the people in Redding, California. At the same time, you can do what you're doing. I can do what I'm doing. Chris Roseborough, Justin Peters, Dan Long, all of my friends who are on the internet. And none of us did this because we had nothing else to do. We've all had jobs and work, and, they're pastors. Do you know what Dan Long actually does for a living?
No.
Dan Long is a armored truck driver.
Okay. He
works for a security, one of those companies, and he works incredibly long hours. He's gone from home more than 8 hours every day.
He does a wonderful job.
He does a wonderful job. He and his wife Robin, and she does a lot of the research to help make their videos. But they are, I think, one of the best examples of what could lay people do if they really felt called by God to call out the false teaching. And it's largely because we've actually experienced that ourselves. Not in every case, but in many cases. I don't know if you know that Chris Roseborough and his wife were both abused in a latter rain cult. A long time ago.
You say call out false doctrine, but it is true. But then you teach the true doctrine. So I think what's really helpful about your channel, and you mentioned Chris Roseborough, is it's a Bible study. You're gonna kind of hear what is being manipulated, and then hear how Orthodox Christianity has always interpreted this section of Scripture, and here's why. And that's an affirming, it's edifying the body for sure.
I have so many videos. I've made, I don't know how many videos now. I could probably look it up, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really don't like doing, I think it's because of that artist part of me. I like to always make things different than I did before because it just isn't very satisfying creatively to have to keep rehashing the same things. But I realize I got to keep rehashing the same things. Yeah. And I do need to teach what is true Christianity as much as I do, point out all the bad stuff. And so sometimes I think, well, I've done a number of videos on good teaching. I've had other people on my channel that have talked about how to interpret the Bible correctly. But if people aren't going to click on those because, oh gosh, they're 8 months old, can't possibly watch an 8-month-old video. I gotta remind myself to continually point towards the truth. And my goal is not to have a lot of followers on my channel per se, although it's nice that I have more followers. That's great. But I want people to go to church and I want them to go to a good church and I want them to never have to worry about all this stuff ever again. I want them to be free from this false teaching so that they can live a life of peace and to know that no matter what happens in this life, Christ has died on the cross to pay for their sins so that they can have eternity with him. Amen. Because this world is not going to be here forever, or at least your life isn't going to last forever. And I think, some of these false teachers mention that here and there, but that really isn't the emphasis. No. The emphasis is always on the great thing that's now. Yeah, it's right here and now. Yep. And it's so disappointing when those things don't happen. It sounds good at first, but you've been around the block. I've been around the block even longer. We've heard promises, right? Yeah. We've heard people talk about the great thing that's right around the corner, and then 10 years go by, and it's like they're not even bringing it up anymore. That thing that was supposed to have already happened. Right. Now they're on to some new thing that's we're supposed to expect next, and that's why I love going to an old-fashioned Lutheran church because we just keep pointing back to Christ and what he did on the cross, and we keep referring to the Bible because we know that's not going to change. Yep. So there's peace in that. Yes. It's not about something is boring because it's not new. It's more about something is solid and true and unchanging. Right. And that's where we really have peace in life. Yeah. And I think the idea of something new and fresh is deceptive in a lot of psychological ways, because who doesn't feel like sometimes our lives are not that great, they're not that exciting, we're not that important, we're just ordinary. And so somebody comes along and kind of pulls you in with all this sense of you're special because you go to this place, right? Yeah. No, and you find out you're special, you're a pawn. You're just being used by that guy.
The analogy that comes to mind is, the true gospel is steak, right? It's good, it's nutritious, it's delicious every time. I can have it all the time. And,
unless you're a vegetarian. Yeah. If you're a vegetarian,
you're in trouble.
Yeah, just fast forward this part of the video.
The false gospel is what is that? The veggie burgers, right? The fake meat. It just isn't the same. It's just bad. Stop trying to make something new, right? Just stick with the good stuff.
What was the candy that the people when I was a kid and we would go trick or treating? There were certain homes that every year they would give out the cheapest possible candy that you half the time wouldn't even eat because it was so, not the Milk Duds, but almost as bad as Milk Duds. Just these hard little.
Somebody's gonna put it in the comments. It's going to be their favorite candy, and they're never going to follow you again.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. But that's what I was thinking compared to steak. Yeah. These crummy little candies or something that has no value and it has no nutrition. But yeah, I'm glad we can talk, and I'm going to put up some of the information in this video. So I don't know how long the video will be because our conversation is one part, and I'll try to present the facts here as well. Yeah. And I'm really glad you compiled all that stuff.
Thanks. Yep.
Do you have, we didn't talk about the fact that you are a professional.
Yeah, I'm a dentist. I fix teeth. I specifically do something that's really fun. It's life-changing stuff. When somebody's going to be either going into a denture, that's what they need. They've got, we would call it a terminal dentition. They don't, crowns, veneers, root canals, the basic few implants, that's not going to fix it. It's really, we've got to kind of scrap the teeth. So rather than going into dentures, I would place 5 to 6 implants in an arch, right? So 5 on top, 4, 5, 6 on top, 4, 5, 6 on bottom, and we screw in a full set of teeth. So it basically gives somebody a full bridge of teeth that look and feel pretty much like natural teeth and keep
Wow.
people from having to go to a denture, which the quality of life with a denture just isn't the same. So it's a very
Oh,
rewarding
really?
treatment. A lot of
Huh.
abuse, a lot of neglect, a lot of people, previous drug abuse challenges. People are getting their life back on track. So it's a great ministry opportunity for me. I really have enjoyed it to connect with people and love on them during a time when they're the most, pretty vulnerable about their smile, and give them a, kind of a new start, a fresh start. Yep.
Okay, so here's a question that maybe you weren't ready for me to ask, but you've been really vocal about your issues with
Yes.
what's happened at James River Church,
Sure.
and you live in that area.
Yes.
How has it affected you on a personal level?
So it has. I mean, we've had some people call up and say, "I'm not coming there anymore." Right, as patients,
Huh.
right? That our doctors team, very many of them are Christians, and so I've shared my faith with them. We're all on the same page, at least like they understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. I've shared that with my team that, hey, I can't just cut, my life isn't, I'm a dentist while during these hours, and I'm a Christian outside of these hours. I'm a Christian all the time, and I'm just a dentist while I'm here. Right. And so, I think it's something I know that whether or not it's impacted business or personal, obviously, I mean, friends and family locally. I mean, I hear, what people say. I don't let it get under my skin, because I really feel a conviction about this. And I know that there's many positive stories. I've getting tons of messages from people that just the other day, a lady says, my friend finally, it's been the last few weeks, just been binge watching your stuff and others, learning about how she's been deceived. And so her encouragement was to me like, hey, I know that sometimes it feels like, this is an interesting thing. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but you have kind of three different camps. You have people that have realized they've been lied to and deceived, and they get out of that church, right? They're out of it, they leave. And then maybe they've been out for like a year or two. And so for them, they're kind of over hearing about false teaching. They've kind of accepted it. So if you're still repeating that message and using it, they're kind of like, man, can you just give it up? Right? That's kind of their take. Then you have the people that, well, they don't want anything to do with it because they're blinded, they're deceived. But you have those precious people in the middle, and you just don't know how many and when they're going to be there, where they come out of that, I'm deceived, and I'm seeing that crack in the door, and I'm open to more. Like I'm kind of doing some research on my own. I'm reading my Bible. The Holy Spirit's working on them. And so I know that's why you do what you do. That's why I'm committed right now to being vocal about this. Our goal is to turn this into a monthly podcast called Out of Context Christianity. Huh. And we'll definitely want to have you on as a guest at some point. But
do you guys
kind of tackling the most? Go ahead.
Do you have a YouTube channel yet? I don't think you do you?
So I have a personal YouTube channel, and I'm going to change the name to Out of Context Christianity. And
you can start a new one too. You don't have to get rid of your personal one if you wanted to.
Yeah. We kind of feel like we need to turn this into, more of a consistent and obviously take some of the focus. It's been on our church that we were a part of, and the people that are the most influenced by it. But at some point, we've kind of said most of what we can say, although they seem to surprise me. I thought I'd said all I could say last year, and then he leaves the Assembly of God, and now I'm like, wow, I can say a lot more about that. But
if your experience is like mine, we were going to this big charismatic church, and it was infiltrated by Bethel, but not to the extent that they were having Bill Johnson come and visit or anything.
Right.
And I actually approached the pastor, and I had a meeting with him where I expressed my concerns, and he actually admitted that, he didn't agree with all of Bill Johnson's teaching. And he even admitted that I probably shouldn't be referencing him in my sermons, which was good on one hand, but on the other hand, he wasn't really trying to get rid of the influence completely. There was even a small group that was meeting that was using Bethel curriculum. At the same time, he was admitting that he probably shouldn't be referencing Bill Johnson from the stage. But I left without creating a big stir, because it was actually a new pastor that I didn't know real well. It was a church that we had gone to. We left for a while. We came back with this new pastor. And so I had somewhat of a relationship, even a friendship with. But I realized I cannot stay here, and I'm not on the board. I'm not on staff. I'm just a guy who contributes to the worship team. And so I left politely, but I made it really clear why I was leaving. And there was a few people that I talked to because they were friends of ours, but I didn't start going to everybody, saying, you should leave this church. You should leave this church. This church is wrong. Because I knew that was going to make a lot of things really difficult for all of us in the future. And I actually live in the same town with that pastor to this day.
Okay.
So in my situation, I was really hoping that when I left and I started blogging, and then when I was making videos, I was going to have all these people leaving that church and saying, wow, Steve, you were right. You know what? Has not happened. I've had a handful of people who came out and they're really thankful and we're still friends. I also have people who still go there and I'm still their friend. And it's not the same as what you guys experienced, but did you at some point think you would get better results than you've had up to this point? And are you a little bit disappointed, or how do you feel about that?
I would say I've been I've been seeing a consistent results from the community and the messages. I mean, it's maybe a dozen or two messages, a dozen or a couple dozen a day from people that have been, encouraging and saying the message is getting out. But yeah, I mean, I think you're always at some point, there's just this, why can't everybody see this? It's so obvious, you know. It's sad. It's sad that anybody would want to follow man over biblical truth. And so it's just it's a difficult pill to swallow, but the Bible's clear that we better be ready to swallow that one because it predicts all of this. So
yeah. And that's why I always try to say in our Hit the Bar episodes, take responsibility for your own spiritual life.
Yes.
No matter what anybody says, no matter what Steve Kozar says, no matter what John Lindell says, it's your responsibility. If you really believe you have this relationship with God, which is what Christians always talk about, then make sure that that's a good relationship with God based on what God's word actually says, not on what some guy says. So
correct.
That's probably a good
great
place
way to summarize it.
That's a good place to summarize and to stop, because we could probably talk for hours.
Yeah. And it's been fun talking to you. I really enjoyed it. So
I really appreciate what you're doing. I want you to be encouraged. I think that you and your wife both are going to have a really positive impact as the years go by. And I want to just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing so that old guys like me don't have to do it quite so much as the years go by. Because I'm feeling more and more like I want to encourage people who are younger than me, who have more energy than me. So I don't have.
I don't know. You got pretty energy. You have good energy. Yeah, you have good energy.
I don't have as much energy as I used to, but thank you. I actually, I don't want my energy to be based on anger. I think that's part of what energizes me sometimes. And of course, that's not good.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a place for us to be agitated to action.
Yeah.
And I think there are probably some people who should be more angry and they should be more agitated to do something because they maybe could do something. But I think I veer in the other direction where maybe I get too angry and I get too agitated. And God is ultimately in control, which is a hard thing to figure out when you see stuff like this happening.
Right.
But that's kind of what we have to fall back on.
It is
God,
true.
Yep. God knows what he's doing, even when it seems like, this is a mess.
Yep.
You sure you know what you're doing, God? And we have to just trust that he does know what he's doing.
Yeah. It's the balance of knowing that we're his hands and feet. We're supposed to be responsible to follow our convictions and be vocal, but understand that we're not ultimately the ones that change the heart of man. That's really in God's hands.
Yep. In fact, the pastor who I had, he moved to a different church, but the pastor that I had here at our Lutheran church for 10 years, more than once, he said to me, Steve, God, the Holy Spirit can handle these things. You know that, don't you? And I'd be like, yeah, but I want to do more.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's good.
It's good to always have that balance, to know that God's in control, but to do everything we can as well when we really feel like that's what God is calling us to. And I think the point you made that I forgot to mention, that there are people who come out of these bad churches and they don't want to talk about it anymore. They don't want to watch videos like mine. And I always say, great, don't watch videos like mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch videos where you hear good teaching. Watch videos where you learn more about the Bible or about church history or about theological positions or whatever. Yeah. I love all that stuff. I would gladly have a channel that talked about everything but false teaching, but that's not where God has placed me at this point. So yeah, I want to encourage people that God really does want you to be at peace. So
yep,
okay.
That's great.
God bless you.
Man, that was a good time. Thanks so much, and excited to see how your channel keeps impacting so many people. So thanks again for what you've done for my wife and I and our family. We're grateful.
My pleasure. May God be praised.
Yeah. Amen.
Basta!
vote was unanimous, reflecting the unity of our church's leadership.
Hey.